Welcome back to Sourdough Sister. I am really excited to dive into all the questions that you guys have been leaving on my videos. So let's just jump right into the sourdough Q&A. If you have a question that I do not mention here, leave it in the comments and I will respond to you. Tony asks, "Thank you for this. I am struggling with this right now. Could you also suggest some flours by brand?" So the only flour that I kind of would recommend would be King Arthur's bread flour. What I think is just more important to focus on is that if you are struggling with your bread not rising or your starter is being lazy, etc., I would switch to a bread flour because it has more protein. However, I do believe that you can make incredible bread and have a great starter using unbleached all-purpose flour. So if you want to go that extra level, yes, bread flour would be the way to go, but don't feel like you need to go out and buy really expensive flour because you can do it just with unbleached all-purpose flour. BR31 Woodlands asks, "Great video, thank you. Can I use tap water?" So you definitely can use tap water. There's some confusion around this because of chlorine levels, and if your starter or your sourdough starts tasting funny, etc., you might want to switch to the filtered water. It's along the same lines as the bread flour though, if you want to take it to the next level. If you want your bread to be incredibly reliable, maybe you're selling your sourdough, any of those types of reasons, maybe you want to take it to filtered water and filtered water only. However, just like with the flour, you can 100% make great bread with tap water. That's okay. I do use filtered water, but I also use unfiltered water sometimes too. I do both. So really, I can make incredible bread with filtered or unfiltered water. And it's kind of more up to you whether you want to take that next step or whether you want to stay where you are, because both are totally and 100% okay. Oh, I'm getting to the end where all the ginger and the turmeric is. Wow. Jess McHale asks, "Our house is usually anywhere from 68 to 72 degrees, and I bulk ferment on the counter overnight. In the morning, after 10 hours, it's bubbly and smells good, but when I do the poke test, it wants to stick to the finger, and there's no indent left behind. Should I try a longer bulk ferment? The crumb has a great flavor, but it's pretty dense." Okay, so basically she's asking if her dough is overproofed or underproofed. And from what she's shared, I would say that her dough is probably overproofed. There's a chance that it is underproofed. However, if the poke test is sticking to your finger, first of all, you need to run your finger under some water or flour your finger before doing the poke test to ensure that the dough does not stick to your finger, or else you won't be able to see what the indent does in the dough. You want the dough to spring back about halfway. So have a gentle spring back after you poke it. So if it springs back all the way really, really quickly, that means your dough is under fermented. It needs more time. Do not shape it yet. If you do the poke test and it doesn't come back at all and you just have this hole now in the middle of your dough, that means that your dough is over fermented. Still make the dough. It will probably still be really good. However, for the optimal sourdough bread, it is over fermented. What you want is to poke the dough and for it to come back about halfway, because that means that it is right in between underproofed and overproofed, meaning it is perfectly proofed. So for her, I really think that she's probably overproofing the dough since it's about 10 hours. My suggestion to her then is to shorten the bulk fermentation to maybe 7 to 8 hours and see if that helps with the dough situation. Janet North asks, "Would you please give instructions on how to add salt after the dough has been fermenting for 20 minutes? I'm trying a stiff starter, so I don't want to add more water." So typically I would say add water. Typically I would say add some grams, maybe 10, 15, 20 grams of water, and then depending on how big your loaf is. and then sprinkle the salt on top of that water, and then dimple in that water and salt into your dough, and then do your lift and folds. But because they're doing a stiff starter and they do not want to add any water to the dough, what they will do is sprinkle the salt on top of the dough and pinch and fold. Pinch and fold, pinch and fold. And it will feel pretty resistant at first, but they will just need to keep going, work through that, and then eventually it will become more incorporated and they'll be able to lift and fold the dough. What's important is to make sure you continue to pinch and fold until it is evenly distributed in your dough. Darlene Palma says, I mostly mix my dough, do the stretch and folds, and then let it double in size. Then shape it and into the banneton and into the fridge to bake the next day. When I take it out of the fridge the next day, should I let it sit on the counter for a couple of hours or can I bake it right away? Definitely bake it right away. Because your dough is cold, it will hold its structure better, which will then give you a better oven spring. So while you can wait before putting it in the oven, I would not suggest that. I would suggest taking it out of the fridge after your oven has been preheating with your Dutch oven or cast irons, taking it out of the fridge, scoring that dough, and putting it in the oven right away. The only reason I would not put it straight into the oven and actually let it stay out for a couple hours before baking it is if my dough was just really, really under fermented. That would be a reason why I would leave it out on the counter, and then once I felt like it was done with the fermentation, then I would put it into the oven. Chrissy Frice says that their starter won't rise. I don't have more information than that, but I will just go over a couple of reasons why your starter may potentially not be rising, just some troubleshooting. So first of all, your starter really wants to be kept around 75 to 80 degrees-ish. They are like a person, right? They're a living organism. So they feel the cold that you feel. They feel the heat that you feel and everything in between. So they don't want to be cold and they don't want to be overly hot. So if you are keeping your starter too cold, then it's not going to rise. It's just going to be upset with you, and then you're going to be upset with it and everything is going to go terribly. So keep it in a warmer spot. And then another reason if your starter is not rising is if you're feeding it not enough or too much. What I mean by that is if you are feeding your starter once every couple days, it is probably just not enough for your starter to become strong. If you're feeding your starter every 5 hours, it's too much. The starter hasn't had time to develop. What I personally do is feed my starter once a day. I feed my starter every night. So that way I'm ready to bake in the morning. If you want to feed your starter twice a day, every 12 hours, that's fantastic. More power to you. That's great. I love it. It will, especially if you are baking to sell your sourdough bread and you need it to be on a more reliable schedule, that is fantastic. However, I think it's much more sustainable and manageable to do once a day. It's not going to hurt your starter. Your starter is going to be totally okay to do once a day. I just think that's much more realistic to feed once a day and not twice a day. And then you can also push it out as your starter becomes more strong to keeping it in the fridge and feeding once a week. If your starter isn't strong, that could be a reason why it's not rising. You need to develop the strength and maturity of your starter. So that means if your starter is new, if it's a green starter and you just got it or you just made it, it will probably need the twice a day feeding for a little bit just to make it really, really strong. And then you can decide when to back off and start doing once a day. And it's okay to experiment a little bit. Starters are strong. They're resilient. Genevieve has been through a lot. You can probably see her like starting to rise throughout this entire video because I fed her right before this. But they're resilient. They can go through a lot. So if you have any other questions about specifically your starter, why your starter won't rise, please leave them in the comments because I can definitely help and I will respond to your comments. JC Mercy Grace says, it seems that my starter rises very quickly. While I think I should allow Flora, that's so cute, to rise and bubble for 8 to 10 hours, but the last few times I let her go, she's already falling back down after just a few hours. So her question is, my starter is rising too quickly. And if it's rising too quickly, that means it's falling too quickly before she's ready to bake with her. And that is basically the opposite of the problem we were just talking about. But it's a great problem to have. It just means that your starter is super duper active, and that's okay. So some things that we can do to fix that is giving her a higher feeding ratio. So instead of a 1-2 or whatever ratio you're doing, do a 1-3 or a 1-4 ratio. That is starter, flour, water. So you're giving 4 parts of water and flour to 1 part starter. So that will give your starter more time because it will have more food that it needs to eat. So it needs to get through all that food before it hits its peak. Another little tip or trick you can do is after you feed your starter, just throw her in the fridge for an hour, and that will slow everything down. And then you can take her back out and wait a normal amount of time until you see that she has peaked. Barbara says, sorry, I can't bear to listen to one more how-to video. 5 failed attempts are enough for me. I'll buy my bread at the store. That is totally okay. Sourdough is not for everybody. It's a process. There's a huge learning curve, and it teaches a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of time. I mean, it's okay. If sourdough is not for you, that's all right. And everybody has their thing. Sourdough definitely is my thing, and I love it so much. And I really, really hope that you guys do too. And if you do like sourdough videos, I hope that you will watch this one next. And please leave any questions that you have that maybe were not answered in this video. Leave them in the comments because I will answer them. And hopefully we can get all of your sourdough questions answered quickly. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.